up here who's helping out. Now Zach has been thrown into this thing like way faster than he was supposed to. He came to me and said, Dan, I'm a Santa Barbara City College student, and I want to kind of network with you guys and see if I can get some stuff going. And I said, well, what do you do? And he says, I'm a marketing, that's my focus and my career path. And I said, wow, are we going to throw you into something big fast? So Linda got to talking with him and said, hey, you know what? We really could use your help, but not so much here in Santa Barbara as much as we could use it in Texas and San Jose and Los Angeles. And he went, oh my God, and she's going to pay to have him float around different places. So we're going to give him a little bit of experience working with you guys so that when he goes to those places, he's not like, oh, no. So I'm going to let Zach introduce Karan Holland here. And give you a little rundown, and then we'll get her up here. You're on, Zach.
Okay, thanks again, Dan. Thank you guys all for coming out today. Really appreciate having you here. Like Dan said, up next we have Dawn Hall. She's helped hundreds of people self-direct their retirement savings. She's a native of California, has a 16-year background in real estate, property management, and mortgage lending. We're really excited to have her up. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thanks so much. Like they said, I have an unusual name and nobody gets it right, so I named my kids Mitchell and Lauren, right? Spell it, pronounce it, I wasn't going to do that. It's actually Karan Hall, and I'm president of U-Direct IRA Services. So what I'll talk to you about self-directed IRAs, but what's really the most important thing about me being here is to find out what do you want to know about self-directed IRAs? What are your questions? And I'd like to get those answers today, because self-directed IRAs have rules that are unusual, and it's important to know those if you're going to use this money to invest. A couple of things I want to say before I get started. One is that there's this great book that came out this year called the Self-Directed IRA Handbook. It was written by a gentleman named Matt Sorensen. He's an attorney, and he fights the IRS and so forth on issues. So when he had his manuscript, he let me preview it, so he thanked me in the beginning. But the reason I'm telling you about this is, if you'll leave your business card for me in the back, my table's in the back, I'll send you a copy. If you're interested in self-directed IRAs and you want to read all the rules, here we go. So again, it's the Self-Directed IRA Handbook. There's Matt. I'm going to be doing an event in September in Orange County with Matt, and so you can come down and meet him in person. So that said, this is U-Direct IRA Services. What we do is we provide the self-directed IRA. What we don't do is give you tax advice or legal advice. But it's just so close to what we do that we have attorneys and CPAs on call at all times, because people say, well, what's the best IRA for me? How much can I contribute? A lot of these things are tax questions. And so when it comes to IRAs, IRAs are for retirement purposes only and for investment purposes only. When it comes to saving for retirement, as you know, there's a huge deficit between what Americans have and what they need to retire. Something like $6.6 trillion. So you're here in this room, you're here to talk about real estate. You're not going to be in that statistic, right? You're here to find out how to save and invest so that you're good. But just to know that if you had $100,000 in a retirement account, which is about the average balance of our account holders, and you thought that was good to go for retirement, if you figure it out, if you're 59 and a half and you retire and you go until you're 86 and a half, that only gives you like less than $400 a month. So we all need to save for retirement, no matter what you do, self-direct or not, whether you're working at a company that's got a 401k that's matching, just save for retirement is the biggest thing I can recommend. Total in retirement funds is something like, it's more like 20 trillion now. A tremendous amount of money, and why is that important to you? It's important to you if maybe you're looking for money for your deals. So if you're looking for money for your deals, then you know that there's this huge pool of money to tap into. All you have to do is find out if somebody has an IRA already, or if they have a 401k from a previous employer. So if you haven't heard about, has anybody here not heard about self-directing their IRA? Anybody? No? Good. One person. Good. Well, a lot of people don't know about this still, and it's like the best kept secret. It's been around. You've been able to self-direct your IRA for 40 years. Isn't that crazy? And so a lot of people are just finding out about it now. The only difference between a regular IRA and a self-directed IRA is the asset it holds. Everything else is the same. It's just the IRA you may have with one company where you have an advisor. You're invested in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Self-directed IRAs, it just opens the doors to things like precious metals, of course, real estate in all different forms, like tax liens and raw land and commercial and residential and all these different kinds of things. That's the only difference. That's what makes it self-directed. And of course, like any other IRA, if you lose money, you're not going to write that off on your income taxes. So you want to be super careful when you invest. I can't stress enough due diligence and how important it is. I had a situation recently with some account holders who invested with somebody that they really trusted. And what happened was that it turns out that they trusted these people so much they didn't make sure that the people actually owned the property that they were investing in, that they had a right to sell it. And they also didn't make sure, after their IRA made a lien on the property, they also didn't make sure that these people they invested with recorded that lien. You see, so that is quite an issue. Do your due diligence. No matter, we find lots of issues all the time. And if you just do a little bit of homework, you can save yourself a lot of headaches. The limits, when it comes to self-directing, the IRS doesn't tell us what we can invest our IRAs in, just what we can't, and you see it's a super short list. It's insurance policies and collectibles. Everything else is okay. S corporations are not on the list from the IRS, but your IRA is not going to buy shares of an S corporation because S corporations don't allow that. Not the IRS. This is their rules. Okay, so if you want to self-direct and take your retirement funds and say turn it into real estate, you've invested into real estate and get that return, and you're working for a company, you've got a 401k, you're pretty much not going to be able to use that money until you leave service in the company. They're usually not going to release those funds unless you ask for what's called an in-service transfer. You're working there, you're in service, and sometimes they'll let you transfer some of the money out. Maybe you used to work for a company and the two companies merged, and the 401k from the previous company you can roll over into a self-directed IRA. So that you can do. So when it comes to self-directed IRAs, I think the most important thing I'd like to leave you with are the expectations of how you use these, because if you walk in thinking that you can do certain things and you can't, you'll be disappointed. I want to make sure you're not disappointed, that you know how they work. So talk about the rules. Publication 590 talks about how IRAs work. And that's where we really see the beginning of the rules about self-directed IRAs. You're not going to borrow any money from it. There are accounts you can borrow money from, they're not IRAs. You're not going to sell anything that you presently own to the IRA. You don't use it as security for a loan, and you're not going to use it to buy property for the future use, or for personal use, present or future. Of course, if your IRA buys a house and then now you're retired and you want to live in the house your IRA owns, you take it as a distribution, and that's fine. But the intention has always been that it's an investment, because again, IRAs are for investment purposes only. That's it. Okay. So certain people are allowed and certain people are disallowed to the IRA. The people who are disallowed are your lineal ascendants and descendants. Think of it like this: your parents and grandparents and their spouses, you and your spouse, and then your children and your grandchildren and their spouses. These people are disallowed, plus anybody offering services to the plan. But the people who are allowed are out to the sides, like your brothers and sisters, your cousins, your aunts and uncles, nieces and nephews. They're allowed. So some people are allowed and some people are disallowed to your IRA. I'll tell you how that fits in a second. In fact, I'll tell you right now. Prohibited transactions. It's the self-directed IRA. If you look at it as a game, these are the rules. These are the keep-away rules. If you commit a prohibited transaction in the eyes of the IRS, it doesn't sound that tough, does it? It's just like prohibited. It's pretty. No, they're pretty serious. They will disperse your entire IRA to you as a taxable event, the whole thing, and perhaps assign penalties and excise taxes on top of it. So when you call us and you say you want to open an account, of course we want to help you open an account, but more than anything, we want to steer you away from a prohibited transaction and one of those horrible tax situations. So we're gonna ask you about the deal. Tell us, what are you investing in? What are you looking to do? And we're going to make sure as much as we can that you don't fit any of these criteria. Of course, the onus is on you because it's self-directed, so you're the one who's responsible to make sure you don't, but we don't want to see that happen either. So number one, neither you nor a disqualified person can benefit from the IRA today. That sounds pretty straightforward. So what that means, though, is we had something come to the office today where somebody's going to self-direct his IRA is buying a house. He's the listing agent. He can't do that. That really goes down here where he can't provide services to the plan. But he also can't personally benefit by taking a commission. So you're not allowed to do anything like that where you receive benefit. Back when I first opened the company 5 years ago, the gentleman came in and he was an appraiser. And in 2009, you can imagine he wasn't appraising a lot at that particular moment. So he had a 401k from a previous employer and was just so darn excited. He came in with this note, slammed it on my desk and says, okay, how do I fill it out? So first off, he didn't even understand his asset, which is not good. So I helped him talk to an attorney and get that straightened out ultimately. But he wanted to take his money, his IRA money, and lend it. I said, that's great, you can do that. Your IRA can be the bank, your IRA can lend money to somebody. So I said, well, who is your IRA going to be lending to? He says, oh, my sister-in-law. I said, well, that's fine. Sister-in-law is out here to the side, you know, that's fine. I said, well, when your sister-in-law gets that money, what's she going to do with it? He says, oh, well, she's going to invest in my company. So, no, you can't do that. That's called it invokes what they call the indirect rule. It's indirect benefit. If it starts from your IRA, goes to your sister-in-law, and back to your company, you're receiving benefit from your IRA, and that's disallowed. So, just keep it arm's length. That's a good rule of thumb. Number two, you're not going to buy, sell, or exchange assets between the IRA and any of these people who are disallowed. Now, you can transfer upon death. That's just fine, but while you're with warm hands, you're not going to buy, sell, or exchange, okay? And number three, you're not going to provide goods, services, or facilities to the plan, a disallowed person. So that goes back to the gentleman who was a listing agent on the house his IRA was buying. Even for free, you can't do it. If your IRA buys a house, and say, for example, you have a son and he's not doing a lot, you say, hey, we go mow the lawn on the house that our IRA owns. Your son is one of these disallowed people. He can't do it even for free. Maybe you're really great at drywalling or something, and your IRA buys a house. You think, oh, I'll go in and drywall. You know what they call it? You know how they tax you when you die, right? They tax you when you sweat. It's called an over-contribution of sweat equity. Beloved? So you're not going to go in and swing the hammers or do any of that work, because it's a prohibited transaction. How does the IRS know that you put in the drywall? I mean, they're probably not going to know, unless there's some kind of paper trail, or unless you have an incredibly clever neighbor who is your enemy. I mean, no, this happens. I mean, people will tell on each other and get the IRS involved. But how do they really know? Just don't do it is the best thing, the best way to go. So prohibited transactions, that's what not to do. The other expectation to have with self-directed IRAs is something super unusual that catches a lot of people off guard, and that is that you personally are not buying that property. It's your IRA buying the property. And that happens all the time, where someone will say, hey, I'm so excited, I'll get this call Monday, I do every week. I just over the weekend, I put this property under contract, I'm so excited because I want my IRA to buy it. And they don't even have an account yet. Well, that's a problem, because they're not buying it, their IRA is buying it, and they've already put it under contract. You can't buy an asset you personally own. So now they've got an ownership interest in that property, they can't sell it to their IRA, it's a prohibited transaction. So they have to back out of that deal. First off, they have to open an IRA so that IRA can actually buy it. They should have done it ahead of time, of course, but in this situation, so now what they have to do is exit that deal, enter into a new escrow, and now that the buyer is the custodian for the benefit of the IRA, it can be like this long. And on a car form, you have to handwrite it because there's just not room. So it's the custodian for the benefit of the IRA. So it's not you buying it, it's the IRA. You don't sign it. We sign it on behalf of the IRA. So that's something that you may not expect about self-directed IRAs, especially as a real estate investor. Same thing if your IRA is lending money. You're not the lender, your IRA is the lender. The custodian for the benefit of your IRA, that's the lender. And then there's UDirect IRA services. And as I mentioned, I formed the company August 31st, will be 5 years. We've this week opened our 2200, yeah, account, 2200 account, that's what I'm trying to say. 2200 of them. And our clients are sitting on about 213 million in assets now. So it's something that's really, there's a huge need for this. It's really, really growing. And when I formed the company, I thought, well, I need a custodian to hold the client's funds. So I talked to some banks, and in 2009, banks, they were kind of dropping like flies. So instead of using a bank as a custodian, I went with a trust company that's non-depository. They're not taking in checking and savings, they're not making loans, a more stable situation. So I've had this relationship. UDirect IRA Services has had a relationship with a custodian, American Estate and Trust, for 5 years now. And so that's how it works, and those are the parties to the transaction. Just important for you to know as you're walking in. Okay, so when you buy real estate with an IRA, I think it's just only fair to talk about the pros and cons. Why would you want an IRA to buy a property? You need to ask yourself that question, and you need to be sitting with your tax advisor to ask yourself that question, so that you get the maximum benefit for what you're doing, for where your dollars are. The pros are that the capital gains, or any money that comes back in, is tax-free if it's a Roth. I mean, what is tax-free in this world? Not a lot. And it's tax deferred if it's in a different kind of account. No time limit for holding the property. You could buy it today and sell it tomorrow if you want. There's no ramification. Buy it today and sell it in 20 years. You're fine. And of course, I think the best advantage to using an IRA is this ability to compound your money faster. Because if you bought this house, whatever house it may be, outside your IRA and you sold it, all the money goes back into your checking account from escrow. You've got a taxable event, don't you? And you know how much is coming out of that. Plus Obama gave us a new bonus tax, the Medicare tax, right, the 3.8% or the 0.9%. So you've got a lot, but if it's inside an IRA, it comes back in and there's no tax removed. So you compound faster because 100% of those proceeds are going back out into the next house, the next deal, the next loan, whatever it may be. So that's the upside of self-directed IRAs. What they do for you is help you use that money and churn it and keep it growing as fast as you possibly can. The downside about buying real estate with an IRA, you want to talk to your tax advisor. If you're looking at a property, you want to be asking that question, is this a property better to hold personally where I can write off the depreciation, I can write off all the repairs, I can write off the property tax, I can take all these, when I fly to that property I can deduct it, is that better for me? Or is it better, is this going to be the kind of deal where maybe, where it's so cash intensive or whatever the reason may be that I want to keep this into a tax deferred vehicle? And if it is, that's great, because the downside of self-directed IRAs and buying real estate with a self-directed IRA is those tax deductions. And the last thing you want to do is take a tax deduction for an asset that your self-directed IRA owns. That's when you open up the can of worms in an audit. That's how they find you. They'll say, well, hey, in this audit, what's this can of paint for? I don't understand. Oh, don't worry about it. That's the property my IRA owns. And then they go digging and they find it. So anyway, just to say that there are positives and negatives. When a self-directed IRA is buying a property, you're going to avoid all the tax, but you don't get the other write-offs. Right? Of course, you're solely responsible for all gains and losses, and that's important to know. It's self-directed, so we're never going to tell you what asset to invest in. We're not selling you an investment. We're not. It's kind of like escrow when you buy a house. You bring the documentation to escrow. You say, I'm buying this house. They say, great, and they push the paper for you. That's the service that we provide. That's what self-directed IRA companies do, is get you from point A to point B. They're not going to say if it's a good house or a bad house or you shouldn't buy this. So just keep in mind that you're the one that's making all the decisions. Okay. My background, I was a realtor for a little while, some property management, then I got into mortgage lending for a long time, and loan servicing and then loan origination. And when I found out that an IRA could borrow money, I was pretty surprised about that. It's not you borrowing the money, it's your IRA. So probably the most common misconception about these tax deferred vehicles here is this phone call. Hi, hey Karen, I'm so excited because I want to take my self-directed IRA. I've got this property. My IRA is going to be a down payment on this house. I'm really excited. It's not going to happen. In fact, we had a deal a couple months ago, went all the way almost to closing, where somebody had a conventional conforming loan going with a loan officer who was really eager to do it, and an IRA money. But a lender won't take an IRA as a down payment because there's no recourse against that IRA. You can't do it. So the lender won't make the loan ultimately when they know what's going on. And your IRA can only borrow non-recourse money. That's super important to know. So your IRA does not go together with a Freddie Fannie loan, doesn't go together with a VA or an FHA loan at all. Private money is fine as long as it's non-recourse. And what that basically means is if there's default, they only come against the subject property. They're not going to come after you. They're not going to come after any of the assets your IRA owns. Because your IRA could maybe have a ton of gold bullion over here, and then this loan could go bad. Well, they're not going to touch that gold bullion. They can only take the subject property. So not a lot of lenders to choose from, I have to say. If you would like a list of non-recourse lenders, I have a list, not necessarily of companies I endorse, but of companies, kind of a courtesy, because people don't know where to even start with. So I've got a list I'll be happy to send you, and I'll give you my email at the end, but it's basically khall@udirectira.com, and I'll send you the list. These non-recourse lenders are going to require a larger down payment on your property than you would normally have, maybe 45, 50, maybe 60%. But you know how loans are, they're based on risk, so that's going to be based on risk. You're not allowed to personally guarantee a loan to the IRA, okay? You're disallowed to the IRA. Remember, you're one of these people. So anyone who's disallowed cannot guarantee that loan. So with a non-recourse loan, they're not asking for a personal guarantee. It's kind of the point. So if somebody who's not disallowed, somebody who's allowed, wants to guarantee that loan, that's different, but none of these people can guarantee that loan. Okay, this is the downside of having your IRA borrow money. Guess what? An IRA, you know, it's a tax-free, tax-deferred vehicle. An IRA can't actually be taxed. And this one is called UDFI, Unrelated Debt Financed Income Tax. If your IRA does borrow money, the proceeds it receives because of the leverage, because of the borrowed money, are taxed. Not the whole thing, just the percentage of leverage. That money that comes back in will be taxed. So maybe you're 50% leveraged in a house, you get a $1,000 rent check, $500 of it is subject to this UDFI tax, which I believe is now 39.6%. So before you have your IRA borrow money, that's another conversation to have with your tax advisor. Like anything else, remember Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, the 7 habits. Begin with the end in mind and start that deal up front. Know you've got UDFI, how's that gonna pencil out in the end? And does it make sense? Because it could be the best deal you ever did. You may get great profits, just realizing that there's a tax involved. But keep this in mind, if you have a traditional or a SEP IRA or a pre-tax kind of account, and you're paying this UDFI now, then when you retire, then you're paying income tax later. So you can get double tax. So before your IRA borrows money, you don't want to go into that blind and not knowing that that could happen. That would be very bad in the end. So now you know, and you know what to steer clear of. Most people, what they do though, they don't have their IRA borrow money. What they do is they'll partner with somebody. If their IRA doesn't have enough money to do the deal completely, then they'll find somebody or get a couple people together. Or if they have a small IRA, they'll invest like in a syndication where it's a pool of investors. So just keep in mind that you don't have to go with the lending route. There are other alternatives. This is the other time an IRA can be taxed, and that's when an IRA is running a business. It's called UBIT, Unrelated Business Income Tax. And this is for all tax-free entities like a church, for example. A church has a bakery over here, and then Joe has a bakery over here. Well, the church doesn't pay income tax, so they can sell their baked goods for less. And Joe has to charge more. It's not fair. So the IRS came in and said, great, we'll charge the church this unrelated business income tax and make it even. Well, your IRA is has the same kind of tax-free, tax-deferred kind of status. So if your IRA is running a business, and guess what, if you're a flipper, that could be considered running a business in your IRA. So that's a conversation to have before you start flipping a lot of properties in your IRA. If you want to read about it, talk to your tax advisor. It's on the IRS's website. It's publication 598, irs.gov, pub 598. Talks about these two taxes that can actually be assessed to IRAs. So how do you get a house into an IRA? It's for some people, it's a foreign concept. But first off, we know what it's like to buy a house, right? It's always fun. Have you ever had bought a house where there was just like no problem? It never happens, does it? There's a valuation issue, or you've got some kind of termite thing. There's always something. So first off, you're buying a house. You got all that going on. But really, adding an IRA to it is really pretty much doing it as a cash deal, because the money's already there. It's coming in from an IRA, unless you're getting money, of course. So the first thing to do is, get that IRA open and funded before you go shopping for the property. That way you're not trying to scramble, because if you find a property and you don't even have an IRA, that's going to be a problem, because it takes a couple weeks to move the money from where it is into the self-directed IRA account. So get it open and funded, and then go shopping for a property. When you do, remember the IRA is the buyer. The custodian for the benefit of the IRA is the buyer. You give us a direction letter, which is our simple one-page form, kind of like writing a check where it's got all that information on it. A direction of investment form, and the supporting documentation, the purchase contract. You give us that, we sign it, get it back to escrow. They do their thing and get everything put together, get the final HUD. You fund it, on the final HUD, ready to go. And the funds get wired, you wire, fund, all the wire and fund, and haven't got fund and record, that's it. And then you close, and now you've got your keys, your tenants move in, and they're gonna make your checks payable to the custodian for the benefit of the IRA. Right, because that's the owner. We had a gentleman who's an attorney whose IRA bought a house like this with renters. He had the account holders write their checks made payable to him, and he thought he was doing the right thing. He took all the money. He took every rent check from his IRA owned property and even filed it on his tax return as income. But what ultimately happened is that was a prohibited transaction, right? Because he had personal benefit of his IRA money. So you want to make sure those checks are written to the IRA. Now here's another way to do it. Because you can't go swinging the hammers or whatever, and you know how real estate is, it needs repairs, you can have a property manager. the tenants write their check to the property manager. Say it's not just one IRA, but maybe 2 IRAs that own this house. Well, technically your tenant should be writing 2 checks, one to each IRA. But if you have a property manager, they write 1 check, goes to the property manager. Property manager can keep a little slush fund for repairs and send the delta back into your account, like that. And just as long as they're keeping records and they'll get audited at some point, then you're just fine. So you don't have to do it directly, but here's what you can do as a landlord when your IRA owns a house. This is your limit. You're allowed to obviously negotiate the deal and all that. You're allowed to screen the tenants, make sure you want them living in your property. You can pick up and collect their rent checks made payable to the IRA. And you can hire third-party vendors. So you can pretty much manage your property in that way without it being considered that over-contribution of sweat equity, right? Without crossing the line. But the minute you start getting a little more involved by doing repairs or trying to take a management fee for doing the property management or something, that's when you run into prohibited transaction territory. Any questions about this part, about owning real estate with an IRA? Yes?
There's a few IRA companies that will allow you to use money for the down payment, but you're saying yours doesn't, is that right?
Okay, well, let's talk about that. The rules for self-directed IRAs aren't different from company to company because the rules aren't made by the IRA companies. The rules are made by the IRS. So there's no different rule between one IRA company and another. It's all the same, just so you know. And you can never use your personal funds as a down payment. And that's kind of a long conversation about it, co-investing with yourself with an IRA. There are pros and cons to doing that. You can get in trouble. So,
Question. What if you have one person, you've got 2 people on the deed, one person's an IRA, another person, like myself, might not just have it in the LLC. Is there anything that you can say here as far as what to do and what not to do?
no, that sounds fine. It's 2 entities. I mean, as long as the IRA holder has no interest in the LLC, it's an LLC and an IRA, you can absolutely co-invest. That's absolutely fine. But of course, then there are 2 checks that need to be cut. One, you need to pay this person, pay this IRA pays this LLC. So 2 checks, yes.
The person that collected rent and is a prohibited transaction, what happens at the end of the day? They have to reverse?
Well, he called us. He called us and he said, he wanted some documentation, and he told us, this is what I've been doing. And so we had to disperse his account to him as a taxable event, once we were aware of it.
Taxable for the money you collected for the interest?
Everything.
So-
Because if it was a tax deferred, like a traditional IRA or a SEP, the money went in, all the like contributions went in tax deferred, right? So every penny of his account was dispersed to him and it was taxable.
So if you pulled out 100 grand for that deal, you had to pay taxes on 100 grand because you pulled it out.
Well, let's be clear about this. When an IRA is investing, it's not like pulling the money out at all. It's just like how your IRA buys a stock and you don't get taxed for that. Your IRA buys a house, it's just a different kind of asset. So he didn't pull the money out to have the IRA invest. It's not like that. The IRA just acquired it as part of the IRA. But because he committed this prohibited transaction, all the assets in the IRA, every penny of the assets in his IRA were dispersed to him. Now, if it was a Roth and he was over 59.5, he could have had it tax-free, but the IRS could have charged the penalties. We didn't go through, we're not the police, we don't tell the IRS, but when we see things, we have to take action. So we didn't report him, we just simply dispersed his account to
So
him.
if it's a guy that's like 45 years old, he put $100,000 into that deal.
Yeah,
He collected 3 or 4 months of rent, and it's a prohibited transaction. Then he's got to pay taxes on the whole $100,000 plus the money collected.
correct, yes, he does.
You can't go putting it back in and say, hey, let's
Well, you
unravel
can't, that's the
this.
thing, once you commit a prohibited transactions, you can't really unring a bell, but I'll tell you what you can do. You can go to the Department of Labor and ask for something called a private letter ruling. And it's a ruling that's just for you, it's not like creating precedent. It's just a rule for that situation and just for you. It can be between 3 and 10 grand for a private letter ruling. But I was talking to a gentleman in my office, came in, he's gonna invest $1 million. Or he's got $1 million IRA, so what he wants to do is buy the house next door. He knows these people next door and he knows it's going into probate. He's got $1 million in retirement funds, good for him. But we talked about, is that a prohibited transaction? And it may be, because if he improves the property next door and it improves the value of his personal residence, didn't he get, I know, right? Right? Doesn't that give him personal benefit? That's what this book is for. If you want this book, I will mail it to you. Because if you're gonna self-direct your IRA, you don't wanna walk into it not knowing what's going on. But if he did that, and the IRS said, this is a prohibited transaction because you bought the house next door, they can decide what they're going to do, but you see, if he's got $1 million on the line, he's gonna spend the 10 grand for a private letter writer if he went there. So what he's doing right now instead is he's going to an attorney to draw up an attorney opinion letter. Actually, he's going to the guy that wrote this book, as a matter of fact, to get an attorney opinion letter to say why, at least he's seeking one now. Will the attorney tell him that no, it's not a prohibited transaction? And that way, if he gets, you know, in trouble with the IRS, that attorney's on the hook. Does that address your question?
I have another question.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a private money lender, and I have a few clients that I've given loans like this to.
Yeah.
I don't have them fill out a 1003 in their name, or I don't run their credit.
Yeah, because it's an IRA that's the lender, it's not a person, it's an entity.
So is it true if I were to run their credit or have them fill out the 1003, then that would prohibit their?
Correct, yes,
IRA?
because then they would be personally guaranteeing the loan.
Well,
you know.
I don't have them sign a personal guarantee,
Well,
but I still can't have them.
I think
fill out the
you probably
application.
can, it's really a legal question to discuss with an attorney, but my opinion is that if they're not personally guaranteeing the loan, that you're probably okay, but I would go get an opinion,
Right.
for sure, because that's important. Yes,
I buy a property for him there, the note does not come to me, it comes to you guys as custodian, right?
correct, yeah. Yeah, we're in custody of that
The
note,
deed.
correct. Yeah, and, well, the note is an instrument too, so, typically. Yes,
Now, if that prohibited transaction was in the Roth,
yes.
what would be the difference in them?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Roth money is tax-free, and tax-free. You have to meet a couple of criteria for it to come out back to you tax-free. Like, for example, you have to have had a Roth at least 5 years. So everybody open a Roth account today, because then the clock starts ticking. As long as you have a Roth account at all, you have a lifetime clock. Just start it ticking. The second thing is if you're over 59 and a half, you can take that as a disbursement and it's not taxable. But if you committed a prohibited transaction, you might still be facing penalties and fines and things like that. We're talking about worst case scenarios that only happen like 1% of the time. It's so interesting, but this almost never happens. But go ahead.
Now, if you're over 59 and a half, it still has to be 5 years?
Yes. Yes, with the Roth IRA, you have to have the funds in for 5 years for a Roth. Yes, Dan.
Traditional compared to a self-directed Roth as far as liquidating and having to end and close that account?
Oh, okay.
Can you explain that?
Yes, so when you, that's a really good question, you know, and it comes up more and more. When you've got a self-directed IRA, you've got non-cash assets in there. When you're invested in the stock market, you're invested in stocks and it's still non-liquid, but it can be sold pretty quick. So one of the things you have to ask yourself, if you're approaching an age called 70 and a half, called RMD, Required Minimum Distribution Age. When you turn 70 and a half, the next year you have to start taking distributions on taxable accounts, not Roths. So that you are pulling that money out so much per year based on the schedule. But how do you pull money out if you have a house? I mean, what do you do? One of the things you can do is to retitle. Say your IRA owns a house and has no cash at all, you've got no cash in retirement, you have to take an RMD, you only have a house, what are you going to do? You can retitle the property into your name, a portion of it, to equal your RMD and pay tax on that value. But you have to consider your IRA has to have enough money in it to, number one, get an appraisal every year for the RMD, because you have to have an appraisal, and to do the retitling work. So it's expensive, but you have to be careful. When you're in 70 and a half and over or approaching at around 68, that's when you want to think, do I want myself, all 100% of my self-directed funds, IRA retirement funds, to be non-liquid? Because the IRS is going to demand you take them. So once you get to the RMD age, there are issues.
Is there a point where they want it all out of there completely, or they just want you to start removing?
You have to start removing it. That's what the government says required. And so if there's a schedule, and your tax person can help you, where you're taking out a chunk, a percentage every year based on your life expectancy.
Okay, so it can go on.
It's supposed to go on for a long
And
time.
on a Roth, self-directed, there's no thing like that at all?
Correct. On a self-directed Roth, the money comes out taxed. There's no required minimum distribution on a Roth because it's not taxable. Exactly. So yes, all these things are so interesting. You know, I belong to this group called the Retirement Industry Trust Association. And we meet a couple times a year to talk about this, like what's going on, what's the latest, and it's good to keep up with this stuff because it's just so important to all of us. When you can use a vehicle like this to invest, like Mitt Romney with his IRA that's somewhere between $20 and $100 million in value. Wow. So that was pretty interesting. So at the REIA conference, someone figured it out. I think because back in Washington, D.C. where we go, the Department of Treasury, there are only 500 people in America who have IRAs that are 20 million or more. 500 people, we could fill this room practically with them, right? That's it. So those really big IRAs aren't big, but if you could have that money tax-free for life, would that be amazing? So just open a Roth, just start saving. And guess what, if you could make too much money to even open a Roth, and if that's the case, there's kind of a workaround. And I love it. It was a law that passed a couple years ago. I'll spare you the entire name of the law, but you can convert other IRA money to Roth regardless of your income. So you can still have a Roth even if you make too much to contribute. And if you want to go deep on that, I can talk to you one-on-one. But you can still have a Roth even if you make too much money to contribute. It's like $179,000 as an individual, and about $188,000 as a married couple, around there. Before that's the break-off when you can't contribute to a Roth anymore.
That's how Mitt did that? Because it sounds like it was just recent that it passed.
No, Mitt Romney invested in company stock. That's how he did it. That's how he did it. But self-directed IRAs have been around a long time, and it didn't used to be that people would come and talk to you in a room like this about self-directed IRAs. Was it like a secret that only the super wealthy knew? And they've been using this a long time. It's kind of a loophole to be able to imagine having all this money. And I know some people that are in real estate investment groups, and you may have heard them speak, where they started out that way with a little Roth. And I know one guy had a small Roth IRA. You can put $5,500 in it now if you're under 50, 65 if you're 50 over. And he started making little microloans to people in his real estate investment club for mobile homes, mobile home loans, little loans. And started churning that Roth IRA more and more and more money until he finally was able to do a bigger deal and a bigger deal. And now I know one guy who's sitting on $1 million Roth, and you probably all know him, you know, and he speaks at all the real estate investor groups. So yeah, so it's something you can do, and guess what? When he retires, he's gonna have that money tax-free, yes.
Once you have a house or a transaction that you want to get your money from your account, how long does that take?
Right, so how long does it take to get your money from the account into a deal? So typically, if everything's perfect, it's 24 to 48 hours. You give us a direction letter, you give us the supporting documentation. Now, if it's a house, you have to go through escrow. It's gonna take what it's gonna take. But with ours, there are always gonna be problems. There's gonna be some little thing that wasn't perfect, and it's gotta go be reevaluated. And so if that happens, it increases, it's another 24, 48 hours to re-review the documentation, make sure it's all still good. So usually, what we try to do, when we get your documentation, at first we scrub it, we look at it, before we submit it to our compliance attorneys to review. And we're gonna try to work with you back and forth until it gets as perfect as we can get it, as far as we can tell. Because we don't want you to have to wait and wait and wait. If we can get this all taken care of in an afternoon, we don't have to start that clock again. So that's what we do at Direct IRA Services almost all day long, is look at people's deals, look what they're doing. It's so fascinating what investors do, you know. Investors are creative people, but they can't always do what they want with an IRA.
Just to follow up
I'm
on
totally
that,
sorry,
sorry.
yes.
What is the documentation that you're providing?
Well, I mean, if you're buying a house, it's offer to purchase. If you're lending money, it's the note. If you're lending on a secured deal, maybe the note and the deed of trust, as you were saying. If you're buying precious metals, it would be the invoice from the precious metals dealer. We'd send the money to the precious metals dealer, they would ship the money, they would ship the gold to Brinks, and where would be custody, things like that. So it's whatever the contract is to purchase the asset. Maybe you're buying into a syndication, then we'd want the subdocs, the subscription agreement, PPM, operating agreement, that sort of thing. Depends on what you're doing. Every deal is different. And creative investors come up with new crazy things. Buying a performing note, that's fun. You could buy your IRA could buy half a note. There are all kinds of things you can do. So yes, but whatever the contract is, that's a supporting documentation. And the IRA is always the investor. Dan, what was your question?
Do you say, generally speaking, a traditional might be better for somebody who's younger to avoid taxes, and a self-directed Roth might be better for somebody who's older to put?
I would not ever advise what is best for you, you know. But I would say this. I would say it's always it depends. Is always the situation. What if you're 70 years old? You're just about to get into RMD, and you've got $1 million in a traditional IRA, and you know you're gonna be taking that money over time, but you are able to buy the Fess Parker Hotel for $1,000. And you've got this deal. So what you decide to do is, I'm going to convert my $1 million to Roth. I'm going to pay the tax on the $1 million, and I'm going to buy the Fess Parker Hotel for $1,000 with my Roth, and I'm going to resell it for like, $17 million or whatever it may be. If you see that you're going to turn a really big deal, then that would make sense. And believe me, I see that. It's wonderful. It's so exciting to see somebody invest and to see them make a huge return is very gratifying, and we see it all the time. Yes?
I have a sense that people think they're just supposed to keep putting money into these things, but really, especially with self-directed Roth, the idea is put a little bit in there and have it generate income itself.
Correct.
So that you get a whole lot of money and you don't pay taxes on it.
That's so true, because you're limited to how much you can contribute, but the gain on your investment is unlimited, absolutely unlimited. Also, the number of accounts you can have is unlimited. You could have 1,000 IRA accounts if you want. There's no real reason to do that, but you could. And in fact, the IRS took away the one reason there was to do it, the 60-day hold, where there's something, one way people transfer their funds sometimes is by transfer, but sometimes they just take possession of the money where they put it in their own checking account, then they've got 60 days to put it into another account. The IRS figured, some lawyer had 12 IRAs, it would just like every year just move it down so he can move it for everybody. But when you take the money out and take personal possession of it, you've got a 12-month clock. You can't have personal possession of your IRA money again, like that 60-day loan for 12 months. So people will work in the system, and so now it's bad. You know, one guy does it, now it's bad for everybody. So now all your IRAs combined, you can only have one 60-day distribution for all your IRAs combined. That's a new rule. That's important to know before you think you can do it otherwise and find out, oops, you have to pay tax on that money you took out for 60 days, right? That's pretty important. So I am looking at the clock. All right, so I'm going to skip this for the sake of time, but just to say that if your IRA depletes its reserves, I want you to know that there are things to do. Your IRA owns a house, and houses are the kinds of things that have so many expenses, unlike any other asset, right? You need a new roof, you need whatever. I mean, who's ever been in a house or bought a house that needed nothing? It doesn't exist, right? So what if your IRA doesn't have enough money? Because all expenses of the IRA have to be paid for by the IRA. So there are 6 things you can do to make up for a shortfall. You can basically you can make a contribution, write a check out of your checking account, talk to your tax advisor. You can liquidate other assets. You've got this gold bullion over here, sell it, use the cash, make up the shortfall. You can transfer money in from another retirement account. Maybe you still have some stocks, bonds, and mutual funds across the street. Bring in a partner. You could take a loan, but it wouldn't be from an institution. It'd probably be from a person. It would have to be a non-recourse loan. And if all else fails, you could just sell the asset. So again, all expenses of the IRA have to be paid for by the IRA, like closing costs, rehab costs, property taxes, anything, foreclosing on somebody. All those expenses have to be paid for by the IRA. And I always feel bad when I get that phone call and someone says, yeah, I paid for it myself. Or I remember one time, years and years ago, someone said, I took out a home equity line of credit to put a new roof on the house my IRA owns. How do you unring that bell? You know, tear off the roof? No, you go to the IRS, or you go to the Department of Labor for a letter. Okay, something called a checkbook IRA, and then to wrap up. Anybody hear of the checkbook IRA? Yeah, horrible name, powerful tool. It's really an IRA-owned LLC. It's not a special kind of IRA. It's an LLC that the IRA buys. But when your IRA has that LLC and you've got checkbook control and you're writing all the checks, guess who better know every single thing that's in this book? You. Because if you're making those decisions with your pen or by writing checks with your IRA money, you better do it right. Because remember, how many people were completely shocked when I told you that if the guy buys a house next door, it could be a prohibited transaction? That sounded pretty shocking, right? So you want it, so it's like with great power comes great responsibility. I saw Spider-Man, and that's what he says. With great power comes great responsibility. That is the checkbook IRA. That's this. You're Spider-Man, and you can do a lot of different things, but you better be careful because you've got a lot of responsibility. All right, yes, Dan.
Go back to that roof and making that equity loan.
Yes.
Had they borrowed the money from somebody else rather than creating their own equity loan?
Right.
Somebody loaned money to their IRA?
It would, if it was a non-recourse loan, that would have been fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have been fine. Okay, so what can you self-direct? Here's your answer. I don't have a lot of time. In fact, now I owe you time. I owe you part of your life back now. How do you self-direct? You open, fund, invest. Open an account, put the money in it, and then invest. Okay, that's basically the 3 steps. And then, of course, collect all. Number 4 should be collect all the profits. That's what we want you to do. For more information, here you go. I want to remind you, if you give me your mailing address, your business card, I will send you a copy of the Self-Directed IRA Handbook. And with that, I want to thank Linda for putting on another amazing conference. This is like the 4th one I've been to this year, so thank you, Linda, so much. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
so she will be here for the rest of the day?
Yeah, I will.
Okay. So you guys have a chance to get back out there. We are gonna take a little break. Is there something you'd like to announce?
I just wanted to encourage you to please mingle with all the exhibitors. We have companies that flew in from very far away, and someone even drove from Utah just to be here today. So they came from Vermont, Utah, Vegas, Arizona. We have people from all over the country. Please go up to them, get to know them, make them feel at home. Give them a warm California welcome. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much, folks.
Okay, so 11:35, we'll be back here. All right, thank you.